People, now who wants me to talk about some UFC, some mixed martial arts? Hold on, I didn't say the name right. When you say the name UFC, you got to say it with some passion, with some emotion. You know, Michael Buffer has a twin brother. Here in the UFC Fight Night! It's not perfect, but it's been a while since I watched the UFC. And today is Saturday. It could be on ESPN or it could be on pay per view. They got two heavyweight fights, but there's one where there's the UFC Heavyweight Championship. Two fighters who have already fought each other twice. This is their third fight. And one of these fighters is going to retire after this. It's going to be, I can't even pronounce his name, so apologize. Please don't pick on me for messing up the man's name that has the championship belt in the UFC, and that is Stipe Mloclc. He's probably either German, European, or Poland, one of those three. And he has a record of 19 wins, 3 losses. He's 6'3", 240 pounds, with a high reach vertical of 8. So his reach is 8. So this guy can knock you out with his right hand, his left hand. He has strong knockout power, very big, very strong, very physical. He has a good fight game. He can fight in the middle of the ring. He can trap you up in the corner. He has a strong mat game. The guy can do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and grappling, and he's a power striker. So he can hit you with either hand, right hand, left hand. He can knock you out. He's like, what if Walter Klitschko or Vitaly Klitschko didn't do professional boxing and he stepped into the octagon of the UFC and just dominated? This guy's been heavyweight champion twice in his career, and then he won the title a third time. So technically he's won it 2 to 3 times, and he's defending his championship against a guy who he beat to become a 3-time UFC heavyweight champion. This is the fighter that Dana White likes. I could see him stay champion for about a year, maybe 2 years, because somewhere in the future you would expect Brock Lesnar to come back to the UFC. This would be the perfect time to do it. You know, leave WWE and come to the UFC and fight this guy, because this guy might be champion and this guy might have knockout power, but there's a difference between having knockout power, being the champion, and then being a superstar in the UFC, and you have knockout power and you're the heavyweight champion, and that seems to be what's missing from UFC. You know, you don't have no Brock Lesnar, you don't have no Kim Shamrock, you don't have no Frank Shamrock, you don't have any of your big major stars in the UFC, and this is one of those fights that people are looking to see in the UFC, particularly in the heavyweight division. So this guy seemed like, in my opinion, I actually think he might retain the title just because he's a little bit bigger, a little bit more stronger. He's been doing this for the past 10, maybe 12 years, and it seems like this guy is not going to slow down at his age. Most fighters at this age are finished. Seems like this guy can go for another 3 or 4 fights, maybe 5 fights. That's looking too far into the future. And his opponent is Daniel Cormler. Sorry if I butcher his last name. And his record is 22 wins with 2 losses. He's 5'9", 235 pounds with a reach of 72.5. So this guy has knockout power in his right hand. And this guy is just as big and strong. Now, he's been heavyweight champion everywhere he's gone. He was in Strikeforce. I saw him in Strikeforce like years ago. Before he got into the UFC, he won 3 heavyweight championships with 2 different promotions. Then he came into the UFC and became UFC heavyweight champion. But before that, he was a light heavyweight champion. So he's like Roy Jones Jr. in a way, like one of these fighters who went from middleweight or welterweight to light heavyweight and then become a heavyweight. And this is supposed to be his last and final fight. If he wins, I don't know, do you retain the championship and do you vacate it? Because it would make no sense for you to win the fight and then you vacate the championship belt. Most fighters, if they win the belt back, they may have 2 or 3 fights like Lennox Lewis did in boxing, and then they just retain, and then they relinquish the heavyweight belt. Because Muhammad Ali did that when he became champion for the second time. He beat everybody, and then when he won the title for the third time, he had maybe 1 or 2 fights as heavyweight champion, and then he relinquished the title, and then he wanted to try to come back and fight Larry Holmes, and then Lennox Lewis would do that like 20 years later. Lennox would do that. Lennox would win the championship back a second time, beat Mike Tyson, and then decide, because When he lost to Rasheed Rahman, it made Lennox Lewis a three-time heavyweight champion in boxing. And then when he wanted to relinquish the title, there was that whole you got to fight, one of the Klitschko's, and this is kind of similar. So I predict that Mloclc is actually going to retain the belt, and I'm going to tell you why. Because he's actually fought this guy twice before. See, the first fight he lost because I think he either won the first fight or he lost the second fight. But the rematch is where he won the championship back. So that tells me he lost the first fight, he won the second fight, and this is their third fight. And to me, if you lost the first fight but you won the second fight, I think he's going to retain it because he's bigger, he's stronger, he has a good fight game. I don't think he's going to make the same mistake twice. And when it comes to UFC fights, there's always upsets. You pick the guy that you think's going to win, and the guy that you pick to win loses. The person you pick to lose usually wins. And it goes, to me, it's 5 minutes if it's UFC fight. So it can be 5-minute round. And I believe if he does a stand-up fight ground and gets homeboy in the corner, the fight's over. Because if you get trapped in the corner and you can't fight your way out of the corner, or if you get trapped on the mat and you can't even get the guy off of you, you're not going to be able to sustain energy, and you're not going to be able to punch and kick, and you're not going to be able to fight effectively to 100%. So if I'm Daniel, I want to keep this fight in the middle of the ring. I want to cut off the rest of the ring. I don't want to be him on top of me, hitting me with hits. I don't want to be trapped in the corner. Those are two things that might cause Daniel to lose tonight's fight. Because if you're trapped in the corner, you're not going nowhere. And then this guy's bigger than you, heavier than you, hits harder than you. And it's why he lost the last fight and had the championship taken from him. And I see the same thing might actually happen again. Because he said he's going to retire after this fight. And like I said, if you win this fight and you get the belt back, do you just have 2 or 3 fights? Or do you just retire and vacate the heavyweight belt? So I think Mloclc is in the position to win by beating the same person twice. It's similar to when Muhammad Ali lost the first fight to Kenny Norton, but then beat Kenny Norton in the second fight, third fight, lost to Joe Frazier in the first fight, but then beat him in the second and third fight. It's similar to that. It's not boxing, it's UFC, it's mixed martial arts, but the situation is similar. So this is a heavyweight fight. And to me, I think Dana White picked the right person. If this guy keeps the belt, somewhere in the future, we could get a Mloclc versus Brock Lesnar. That would really get UFC fans hyped up for this fight. Because you haven't had no superstars. No Ronda Rousey, no Kim Shamrock, no Quentin the Rampage Jackson, no Tito Ortiz, no Randy the All of those guys are retired. And Ronda's gone, so it's like you need a star. And this guy's heavyweight champion, but he needs that superstar fight in the UFC that kind of elevate him. Like, yeah, there's Cain Velasquez, but he needs to get back in shape, and you could probably possibly do that. If you can't get Brock Lesnar, Cain Velasquez, or Gio Santos, one of those would be a good high-profile heavyweight fight in the UFC. Yeah, I know my shit when it comes to mixed martial arts. Not bragging, I just know my stuff when it comes to boxing, MMA. So if you guys like me doing this prediction, you'll let me know by going in the comment section and telling me if you want me to talk about some more UFC or no UFC. Until then, peace.